Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist. My name is Joel Goldberg, and the show is presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Together, there's no stopping you. Enterprise Bank and Trust was founded by entrepreneurs with the core focus of serving privately owned small and medium-sized businesses who have a story to tell. Enterprise's commitment is to listen, learn, and guide clients to a lifetime of financial success. My name is Joel Goldberg, as I said, and I'm coming to you from the Kansas City Audiovisual Studios. They create engaging spaces. Check them out at kcav.com, and I'm happy to connect you with Alan Landever if you want more information. I've got a great guest today. I always have great guests as we continue to push forward here on season 5 of Rounding the Bases. And what I love about my guest today is she's involved in so many aspects of business entrepreneurship from really different angles, which I think makes her perspective very interesting at this point. She is an entrepreneur. She is a lawyer. And let's jump right into it so we can talk a little bit more with Adrienne Haynes, who joins me on Rounding the Bases. Adrienne, how are you?
Good morning, Joel. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And I know, first off, it's been hard for you and I to get in touch at times because we've both been so busy. And I think that you've got your hands in so many different elements of the community that, to me, it seems like, and you can tell me otherwise, that if you're not busy with one thing, you've got to be busy with another. Is that fairly accurate?
That is definitely true. It is definitely a juggle. But, at this point, I'm pretty good at the balance of it all. And the good thing about all of the work that I do is that it all fits under a similar mission. So the mission that I've really outlined for myself professionally is to aid in the creation of sustainable businesses and communities through transferable wealth solutions and through entrepreneurship. And so for every opportunity I get, I check it against that mission to see, hey, does this make sense? And can this fit into the balance of it all? And I'm really grateful to have been able to find work that does.
You are an entrepreneur. You are a business attorney. You are a coach. How would you divide those pieces of the pie? What percentage of what are you? Is it kind of an even split for you?
I told myself before, as my career began, that I always wanted an equal mix of business and the law. So I would say that seed law really takes up probably the majority of my time, and then everything else kind of squeezes in around that, luckily.
Well, Adrienne is the managing partner of Seed Law, but there's, as I mentioned, also so much more. So I want to start with this because you're so involved in the entrepreneurial community, and I know that Global Entrepreneurship Week is something that you are really busy with as well. But what have you seen over these last 6-7 months in the entrepreneurial world, and also just from so many of your business clients?
It's been a bittersweet time, I think, for entrepreneurs, because in a downturn, any kind of recession, which this pandemic really has created for many of us, you see people starting businesses through entrepreneurship by necessity. So perhaps they were laid off, or their existing business venture is transitioning or closing out, and they're trying to start something new. So we're excited to be able to work with new entrepreneurs in this time. But in the same token, as we all know, there have been a lot of businesses that have been hit really hard during this time and aren't recovering as quickly as they want. And so that's the part of being a professional service provider that I think is really important, is being with people in the good times and helping them get launching their business, but also really being there through the strategic times, the difficult times, and making sure that people, can come out on the back end and be able to try something else. So it's been an interesting, I call it a bittersweet time.
Well, it's a time, and I've talked about this with so many entrepreneurs on this show, of opportunity if you can survive it, if you can push forward. And I think that's probably the way you were wired anyway. As a woman that was going through law school, running businesses, taking the bar, doing all of these things, how much of that ability to juggle, so to speak, how much has that ability helped you during these times?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my ability to juggle first started in college. So because of the scholarship that I had, and because of the major that I had, which was entrepreneurship and Spanish, I was involved in, 15 student organizations. And so it was really in college that I learned the beauty of the juggle, I would say, maybe even back in high school. And yeah, it's integral, I think, to my career now. And it's important because it helps you to pivot. I think, which a lot of people have had to do in this time, and which entrepreneurs, we're pretty, that's a muscle that we have exercised often. And that I think in order to be a true entrepreneur, you have to allow yourself the trials and the tribulations to really grow that muscle, if you will.
Right. And that, by the way, is a muscle that will always serve you well, no matter what the times are. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so, in your case right now, I do want to go back. I mean, as someone that went the law route, but had the entrepreneurial spirit. Oh, by the way, throw in the Spanish there. It's one of my favorite questions to ask. What did a young Adrienne Haynes want to do?
So when I was young, I wanted to, well, I would say in high school, I really started to decide what I wanted to do. And it was always around bringing people together, convening people, giving people what I called back then like that third place. We know we have home, we know we have school, but for young people, what was that third place? And so I wanted to own community centers and I wanted to run residential camps way back in the day. And actually, I did that all the way through college. And even in law school, I was helping run a residential camp in Illinois. So yeah, I was well on my way to becoming a camp director.
And so here you are. But there is, I think that I don't know if I'm reaching here. I mean, I think there's some similarities in terms of the way that you do and are able to interact with people and affect their lives and be so involved in what they're doing. Was there something that you pulled from that direction that you're able to take in this direction?
Sure. I think one of the most important skills that I've had from being a camp director to my work today is the ability to develop really effective curriculum. And so I'm fortunate, as you mentioned before, to be a business coach, but also to help design business programs for other, organizations or universities that are interested in working with or training entrepreneurs. So really the first job that I used that camp skill in was running a construction incubator. And so we were working with construction contractors over a 3-year period, really trying to work with them to grow their business and to coach and to mentor them into success. And so, yeah, I was using a lot of my camp director skills, and I had run a painting company at that time. So, just these collection of experiences that really helped translate into the coaching and incubator development work.
Well, and I think that's interesting too, because you have been involved in so many different elements of the entrepreneurial world and beyond, that has to help you serve your clients and your attorneys really well at Seed, and even from a leadership standpoint too, right? I mean, I'm constantly talking to leaders that talk about needing to be not just at 30,000 feet, but at the ground level. So how much does that wide ranging repertoire help you?
That's a great question. And I think it does permeate the legal work that I do. I'd like to think that, and we'll talk about it a little bit more with one of your questions, but the work that I did at the incubator really trained me to becoming a good attorney. I had the opportunity to really sit, work side by side and learn from business owners and understand, I knew as an attorney as a non-licensed attorney at that, or law school graduate at that time, that every business decision had a legal ramification. And so being at the incubator allowed me to really study that and then bring that into my work today. And so as an entrepreneur, as someone who's had that experience to really kind of sit and study, we work with our clients really, on the day-to-day transactions, but we're really trying to work with them to look ahead to make sure that they don't have any surprises and that they're able to really focus on pursuing their mission, because we've had the ability to think about today and also to look ahead a bit. And, at this point, so gratefully, the law firm is 5 years old. And so we've been able to work with such a wide variety of clients over the years, and we get to, use what we learn from some clients and apply them to others. And that's been really helpful.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about what led you to the law firm. Maybe not what led you to the law firm, but some of that background too, and having the fellowship opportunity. What did that mean to you and your growth in your career?
Sure. So what led me to law, in short, was I was a camp director in college, and I was also studying entrepreneurship as my major, and we had to take a business law class. And in short, I really fell in love, and I wondered why, in all of the entrepreneurial work I had done to that point, we hadn't been talking about some of those compliance and foundational things early on. Instead, we were really romanticizing the idea. And so I'm just wired as a very, kind of, I think, strategic and analytical person. And so for me, I always joke that I said, I'll take one for the team. I'll go to law school to teach other entrepreneurs really how to, understand those legal ramifications of those business decisions. So that is what really brought me to law. And then for the fellowship, that was a fellowship that I had with the Kauffman Foundation. I was able to serve as an innovator in residence at the foundation, and my fellowship actually just wrapped up like last month. And it has been a whirlwind, just about 3 years. And, in addition to the law practice, I have a consultancy where we work with communities and individuals. And so I've worked with Kauffman for years. And through this fellowship, we had the opportunity to think about systemic challenges and all the work that we had done to that point, and really try to create some solutions that could help advance communities and really make sure that, we were helping lower barriers to entrepreneurship for all people, which is like totally right up my alley, of course. And so over the last 2.5 years, we've been working in 3 communities to develop this community innovation model. And I could go on and on, but it's been really exciting.
Well, that's a good thing to go on and on about. So let's expand that conversation, because you are opening doors for others. And I'm guessing that some of that is for those of color that want and need that opportunity. It might be a financial side of things. It may not be color, but I think what I'm hearing from you is inclusivity and trying to help open those doors, which you are in a position to do that because of your law firm, because of your experience with that fellowship, because of the connections that you have made in this town. So tell me more about that responsibility and being able to provide that access for others.
Sure. So thanks for that too, Joel. I would say that the inclination for what I focused on in my fellowship really came from that time I was able to run the incubator. So the incubator that I ran was in Blue Hills, which is a neighborhood in the heart of Kansas City, that many would say an incubator could never survive in. And we could go on and on about the stereotypes about these neighborhoods. But I found the total opposite. I found passionate people, innovative people, creative, which of course we knew was the case. And so what I noticed in that work, when I had the opportunity to have the fellowship, I was researching innovation districts. And what I noticed in the research was a gap that I had seen in my work at the incubator, which was that we were creating these really innovative solutions in communities, but not really effectively engaging those that were the neighbors in the community. And I think it's a challenge that all of us kind of recognize if you do kind of community economic development work. But what does it really mean to develop a solution to combat that and to really engage and equip those that are the most key stakeholders? And so through the opportunity at Kauffman, I had the space through my consultancy to sit down and work with 3 communities and really develop using how others would create an innovation district, but instead allow community members, leaders, and business owners to lead that process and outline not only financial solutions, but we outlined 10 different types of capitals that communities could use, identify, and leverage to help elevate their innovation and create a 20-year plan, so not just today, but a long-term plan. What is it really going to take for us to create innovation in our neighborhoods? And I think that we can if we work together.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I've had this discussion so many times here on this podcast that we're seeing growth. We're seeing more opportunity. There are people that look more like me that are understanding the systemic ends of what men and women, boys and girls of color have dealt with from almost really since the day they were born. There are others that don't fully understand that yet. I think they want to understand it, but they don't understand it. It's a little bit of that. Well, I mean, I love everybody. I can't have anything racist involved in me, or I'm not partaking. You know,
Yeah,
so
sure.
there's that end of things. How how much have we grown? How far do we have to go?
I think a big part of what you were mentioning and sometimes not being able to see that gap is understanding what a systemic challenge is. It's a challenge that affects the whole. And when we create small solutions, it can impact the whole. But that we have to do those things really at scale, if you will. It's a little esoteric, but it takes a minute to kind of understand, okay, what does a systemic challenge mean? What does that look like in my life or in my community? And I think once people kind of understand that viewpoint, it makes it a little bit easier to understand how we as individual actors can play in, what we have to contribute, perhaps our blind spots and our biases. And I think it allows an opportunity for us to have a more effective conversation, which I think we've made a lot of progress in. To your direct question, but I think we know by looking at the news and even everybody's social media feed. I mean, we have a lot of work to do, but I think if we recognize that we all play a role and a direct role in that work, it makes it a little bit easier to understand and identify our own personal action steps.
And I can only speak from my perspective, but I feel like we are making progress.
Mhm.
However, when I look at social media, when I look at the news, oftentimes it feels so slow. And so I can only imagine that perspective from um, from people of color that have dealt with it their whole lives. You know, it has to feel like the slowest push forward, one that so often involves step backwards too. But it just feels like this is just my perspective because I feel like the light turned on for me. I've said this many times before on this podcast that I was always raised to treat people the right way. I think I always did treat people the right way, but just because you treat people the right way doesn't mean that you understand the challenges that they're dealing with on an everyday basis. So when you talk about going in to say the Blue Hills neighborhood, if other people like me were down there and living that life or that world, you would recognize that there aren't the same opportunities that someone has in a different neighborhood too, right? And so I think my question to you is how do we keep pushing that forward together? Because I think there are a lot of people that do want to help. There are a lot of people that understand the value of human beings and also the importance of community. If our communities are growing and there's more opportunity, everybody does better.
Sure. What I will say about that is I think we have to be, that was a big part of my project, right? Understanding the data that we're developing about our communities, which then influences the way that we're able to perceive and look at our communities. And an integral part in that is allowing communities, of course, to develop their own data and their own voice. But what I'll say is that I'm always mindful in conversation not to make it seem, I guess, like a minority position is the best way I can put it. Because as we talked about earlier, in entrepreneurship, you always have to be able to pivot and to seek out different solutions. And what I'll say about, I guess I'll speak for myself as a African American woman, what I know is that the constraints that I faced in my life, creativity loves constraints. So really it makes me a better entrepreneur. The ability to really strategize in both lean times, which in entrepreneurship, I think we talked about before, it's going to take twice as long and it's going to cost twice as much. But that resiliency and that grit that's developed is a capital. It's an individual and a social capital. And that was a part of what the essence of my project with the Kauffman Foundation was as well, because I think, we have to look at these communities that we have considered to be disenfranchised in the past and allow them to make space to lead. And we don't always do that. If we make decisions for people, then we'll never allow them to be able to seek and pursue their own innovation. But when we sat down and we developed a model for communities to engage in conversation and really create strategies together to think about innovation, they were the most strategic solutions that anyone from the outside could have created. And so I think we should, when we think about our communities, we have to maybe make space for those who have been most disenfranchised to lead. I said that 3 times, but that's, I think it's really important, because the data that comes out about communities can be so negative. It's, we're talking about the most horrible things instead of saying, okay, what can we do to help inspire people to lift themselves up by their own bootstraps, because there is creativity there. So,
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The other side to all of this is that if, as an entrepreneur, as a member of this community, if it is systemically more of an uphill climb being someone of color, it's even a steeper climb being a woman of color. So how much, when you're talking about systemic, does that add in the whole issue of male versus female, any of the sexism that is involved? I mean, this is the thing that I've come to understand, and I can't walk in those shoes. I'm going to try to understand as much as I can, but that's one of the steepest hills to climb. As a Black woman in Kansas City, who has accomplished what you have, and I know you're going to accomplish so much more, how challenging was that?
See, that's the interesting thing about me, and perhaps it's my background as an athlete, and of course, I think like my true fibers as an entrepreneur. I don't consider those things to be challenges, and I know that that's, it's popular in the mainstream media to consider them as challenges, but this is who I've been since birth. So if I would consider that a challenge, I wouldn't be able to be successful. I would end up being my own oppressor, if you will. And I had a good mother who taught me about, self-esteem. That's a part of it. But the reality also exists, of course, that African Americans, people of color, and especially women do face different disparities when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I don't mean to totally disregard that, disparities in general. But the great thing I would say about entrepreneurship is that it allows us to activate our human right of self-determination. So to create my own path. I'm not in a position where through my own companies, I'm asking for, permission. Instead, I'm innovating, and I don't have to, those glass ceilings aren't necessarily there if I dare to move past them. I won't say that it's been but in the same token, there have probably been clients or, perhaps lenders that may not work with me because I'm an African American woman, but those, as we know, wouldn't be the people that I would want to work with anyway. And so I think entrepreneurship allows you to really kind of define your own way.
Well, you sound like so many of the great athletes that I've covered over the years that basically have this mentality, or they say, "Oh, you say I can't do this? Fine, let's go." That it's not viewed as a deterrent. It's almost viewed as for lack of a better word, as a challenge. Okay, you want to see if I can do this? Let me show you.
Or my competitive advantage,
Sure. Well, I think it's one of the same, right?
Sure.
Okay, let's get to the baseball-themed questions. Okay, right. Brought to you by Kissick Construction, trusted team, reliable partner. Check them out at KissickCo.com. What is, for you, Adrienne, the biggest home run that you have hit in your career?
I would say my biggest home run is really being able to define my own mission and to make a living in pursuing it. That is the ultimate blessing, I think.
Not a bad thing, right?
It really isn't, and there's a lot of different milestones that have come to this point, but all of those things just show that there is a way to pursue your life mission in entrepreneurship. And that in itself, I think, is my biggest home run to date.
I think the beauty, too, of the entrepreneurial journey, I mean, we were talking before about what you wanted to be as a kid, is that this journey and this path, which I think is true for anybody, no matter what they do. Like, I knew that I wanted to be on TV, but I never knew that it would show up or turn out the way that it did. Like, when I was a kid, there weren't pre and post game shows on television. It wasn't, what I wanted to be back then. I want to be on the news. I want that, like, is totally different than it is now. So life changes, and we evolve as people, as society, as certainly as entrepreneurs. But look, I mean, you talk about a series of home runs. If I told you that you were going to be, equal parts or something close to it, managing partner of a law firm, entrepreneur, finishing up this amazing fellowship, you would have said what?
I wouldn't have been able to believe it because, well, I could have believed it, I'm sure, but I wouldn't have been able to see what that looks like. Because, in order to be something, you really do have to see it. And when I first set out to be an entrepreneurial lawyer, people were like, they kind of laughed me to scorn. They were like, oh, that's not a thing. But I knew in working with entrepreneurs first that there was this gap that I was witnessing around compliance and foundation and really being able to have that shored up so that you could pursue the dream. And so that's been what I really set out to see if it could be a thing. And I've been successful in doing that. So I didn't know what it was going to look like then, but I had an inkling that it was possible.
Well, and I think just from hearing what you're saying and some of the other times that we have talked off the air, so to speak, that you were going to be successful no matter what. You might not have known exactly what it was going to be, or maybe you thought it was something else. But I mean, to me, with your drive, your confidence, you mentioned your mom, the way that you were raised, you were destined for something successful. But again, part of that fun journey is not knowing exactly what it looks like. Again, look, your journey is still continuing, as all of ours are. With that said, there are always going to be stumbling blocks along the way. So what's the biggest swing and miss you've taken, and what did you learn from it?
All right, my biggest swing and miss, I alluded to it earlier. And as an entrepreneur, of course, you either win or you learn. And so one of the key lessons in entrepreneurship is fail fast. And so when I had graduated law school, I was not able to pass the bar right away. And so in that time, I really had to understand, like, am I going to do what I set out to do? And how am I going to use my time wisely in the meantime? And so I was really grateful to have those, what I would call failures at that time, or swing and misses early, because it shored up my commitment to the mission. It helped me spend time at the incubator and really be able to learn from business clients and to develop curriculum. And so it was a swing and miss on one side, but I think that's the thing about swing and misses. You have to learn from them and really try to use your time wisely, even in the meantime. I don't know if that applies directly to baseball, but
it absolutely does. I love every bit of that message. I really do. And just the perspective of understanding you are going to lose some battles, but you don't lose them if you learn from them. If you keep making the same mistake over and over again, that's a different story.
Sure. And one of the things that was interesting in hindsight was that I was glad I learned those lessons back then to understand how I was going to personally deal with what looked like a failure, perhaps from the outside. Because that's the thing about those times. It's an internal battle about how are you going to win or learn from this. And so I think if you really learn and are able to implement that kind of grit and resilience, then you end up winning.
No question about it. Last baseball themed question, small ball. What are the little things that add up to the big things in the world of Adrienne Haynes?
I was thinking about this morning as I'm back to trying to work out, as many of us former athletes probably go through this cycle. But my favorite workout app says, it doesn't happen in a day, it happens daily. And so that's a good reminder for me. It's really about, the discipline of waking up and really being self-motivated, I think, in entrepreneurship, because no one's going to do it for you. And so for me, it's about being dedicated, being really organized, and really making sure that I'm leaning on and communicating with my team.
There's so many sports analogies and experiences that apply there. And we always say it in the baseball world that you could strike out 4 times. You can, struggle all game long. But if you just do one thing to help your team, if you make one little stride forward, if you do something to contribute, then to me, you're winning the day. And as far as that working out part of it, yeah, I need to win the day a little bit more. So that's true of many of us. But let me move on now to my 4 final questions as we round the bases. And the first one, we'll go right back to that topic. Tell me about Adrienne Haynes, the athlete growing up.
So I ran track. I ran 2s and 4s. I was a little too slow out of the blocks for the 100, but don't try me on the 400. You see, I still have a sprinter's attitude. And so I was on the track team. I was on the basketball team, and I was also on the dance team.
How did that all come together?
I had always been a dancer, I think, even as a kid, just jumping around, and then I loved basketball. And so somehow I was able to do all three. And so in college, I ran track my first year, but I danced all four.
Wow. I mean, that's really putting a lot together. It actually makes sense, but I think this actually goes back to how do you have the time to do everything, which is something that you master, I believe, nowadays.
Yeah, I think it was something, of course, as a student athlete, you learn those skills. You have to be dedicated in order to be successful. And so today, of course, it looks a little bit different, but those skills of dedication, commitment, balance, and self care, I think, have still been integral in my life. So I'm grateful to have learned those lessons then.
All right, let's go back. Second question to about a year ago, almost a year ago to the date of us recording this here in November, your TED Talk. Tell me about that, the excitement, the nerves, and the message.
So actually, my TED Talk was like a month ago. It was
that's right, because it was pushed off.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that was the challenge, was that it was a TED Talk I had prepped for a year, which is a whole other level of stress. Right. But I'm so grateful to have gotten the TED Talk done. It was a TEDx UMKC talk, and I was talking about just the great communities and the research and the work that we uncovered in my fellowship. And I'm grateful for the communities we worked with, and actually we'll be working with another 5 communities to really implement this community innovation design model. So it's been a fruitful few years with the fellowship, which again just concluded. It was about 2.5 years long.
Yeah, I remember, because I remember you were telling me when we talked about the delays, rescheduled multiple times, and so finally, here you are. Was that some form of a life-changing experience to be able to get up and do that?
Well, if you've ever run track, you know how difficult false starts are. So that was, difficult in prepping, but also in perfect time. That's just how things go, because by the time the TED Talk was finally recorded and we were able to deliver it, my fellowship had just concluded. And so I was able to share the entire story and the ultimate outcomes of the project, and not just brag on the communities, which I would have been, and what we were planning to do. And so that's the beauty of things. They work out exactly the way that they're supposed to. And the great thing was I was able to, on a pretty great platform, to just brag on communities that took the time. They were a part of our pilot program for over a year. They committed and they really developed solutions. And I'm just, I think it's a model that can be implemented in many communities. And that's been the best feedback, I think, is people who respond and say, hey, we want this in our neighborhood. And, we want to figure out how we can make our own innovation plan. And it's designed that way. So it has been a great time. I'm grateful for that opportunity.
All right, third question as we round the bases: Global Entrepreneurship Week in Kansas City. What does that mean to you?
Well, Global Entrepreneurship Week, I am grateful to have been a part of this initiative for the last 10 years. And so this year, I am grateful to have been appointed the Missouri State Coordinator. In the past, there's 150 events in town, but now with the impacts of coronavirus, there are hundreds of activities, but they're available online. So there is still time. Well, first, Global Entrepreneurship Week takes place November 16th through 22nd. So it's coming up here soon. And if people are interested, they can visit genglobal.org/events. And if you hone down the search to the state of Missouri, you can see that we have partners from all over the state, but they're hosting virtual events. So I think it's a great way and a great resource, and some normalcy in a year that's been quite difficult for entrepreneurs, an opportunity to connect together, even if it's a virtual platform, and continue to share resources, because I think that's the importance of entrepreneurship, making sure that our ecosystems are still strong, that we're educating one another, and that we're really making sure that we're each one teach one, if you will, contributing what we can.
Last question, the walk-off. You talked about people kind of questioning or unsure of being an entrepreneurial lawyer, but I know that is such a sweet spot for you, being the entrepreneur yourself, understanding what so many of your clients and so many people in the community are going through and the challenges they have. Two-part question: one, what's the best part about being an entrepreneurial lawyer? And two, where do you want to make the biggest impact long term?
Ah, surprise questions. Those
Yeah,
are
I threw that
fun.
one in there. Keep you on your toes. But like you said, you're an athlete. You can handle this.
I think the best part of being an entrepreneurial lawyer is the clients that I get to work with. Honestly, I get to work with some of the most innovative and creative entrepreneurs in the Kansas City and the state of, Kansas City area and our state. And, these are people who have taken the challenge to create their own business and step out on faith and and hustle and make it happen, and are also wise enough to engage professional service providers. So that honestly, some of my favorite people. And the second part, what was the second part?
Long-term goals. I mean, you have the platform, Adrienne, to make an impact. You already have here in this community and beyond. So where do you want to see things go, and in terms of what you can do?
I think as an entrepreneur, and for me, a big part of the work that I do is building systems that can scale. And so I'm grateful to have done and to keep doing work in the Kansas City area and in the state of Missouri. And of course, I try to work on models and build things, businesses, in ways that can be duplicated in other areas. And so that's the best honor for me when we're doing things that are impactful here in the Kansas City area, and we can duplicate and share those best practices with communities and organizations across the country. That's always been a blessing, and I hope I can continue to do that.
I know you will, and I know you'll continue to do that and much more. My only advice for people is don't get out there and try to race Adrienne in the 200 or the 400. Right? That competitive spirit never goes away.
No, I'll still take them.
Yeah, I'm not asking. I'm not signing up for that one at all.
I had my spikes in the background.
I know. If anyone wants to get a hold of Adrienne to learn more about her services, her impact in this community, and a long list of whether it be involvement, groups, consultancies, awards, you name it, you can find it at adriennebhaynes.com. It's ADRIENNE Haynes, HAYNES.com. Make sure that everybody gets that Adrienne right. 2 N's in there. It'll be in the show notes. Most importantly, Adrienne, congratulations on all of your success on Seed Law, on the TED Talk, long overdue, and all of your success pushing through these tough times. And I always enjoy talking to you. So thanks so much for doing it, Adrienne.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much, Joel.
All right. Great to visit with Adrienne Haynes here on Rounding the Bases. And that is going to do it for another episode here on the podcast. A shout out to my sponsors, Kansas City Audio Visual, Kissick Construction, and Enterprise Bank and Trust. Businesses often come to Enterprise Bank because they demand and, quite frankly, are worthy of more than the status quo and need a local partner who understands their business. Enterprise Bank and Trust, together, there's no stopping you. My name is Joel Goldberg. You can reach me at joelgoldbergmedia.com, and hope to catch you next time on Rounding the Bases.